The house in front belongs to a neighbor and her son, both very dear to my family. When her parents spoke, the siblings came to an agreement and let her live there since it was what she wanted and matched her financial situation, as she was the youngest. Time passed, she got married, had a son, who is a few months younger than me, and separated a few years later. When I was little, I never liked visiting the house. I felt sad when I was there, with no apparent reason for such a feeling. My friend got his cousin's submarine Super Nintendo with some games I didn't have, and he wanted me to sleep over at his house. I was 8 at the time and had no issue sleeping away from home, though I was a bit apprehensive about the invitation. However, I pushed myself to go, encouraged by both his mother and mine, who said she would make hot dogs and chocolate cake that only she knew how to make. My mom packed my bag with appropriate clothes and hygiene items, and the neighbor said to bring warm clothes. My mom looked puzzled and said, "What? In this heat?" But she insisted, saying that it would get very cold at night and that they would need blankets all night. With everything packed, we crossed the street and went to her house. A small detail is that I had never been there at night. As soon as I stepped in, the feeling of sadness changed to oppression. Somehow, my body was telling me not to stay there. Ignoring this, we went straight to his room to play, while his mother went to the kitchen to make our snacks. The house itself was huge, with 6 bedrooms. From the living room, there was a hallway to the bedrooms. My friend's room was the first on the right, hers the first on the left, then a guest room on the right, and his mother's doll room on the left. The last 2 doors were not used by them, and usually remained locked, so they are not relevant to this story. His mother had the strange habit of collecting old dolls' ornaments dressed for cold weather, usually sitting. I remember well because my dad sold these ornaments, and she bought several from him. She arranged all these dolls elaborately on various shelves, tree branches, and styrofoam houses she had made. Despite how strange this description sounds, it was actually very beautiful, and she cared a lot about the place. We were playing Street Fighter 2, which I didn't have at the time, and having fun despite the bad feeling in the air. They weren't kidding when they said the house was cold at night, while it was certainly just below 30 degrees Celsius outside. Inside, I was already wearing my warm sweater, pants, and socks. His mother called us to eat, and we shouted that we would come after finishing our match. When I stood up, one of those dolls fell near the room door. I picked it up and said, "Hey, your mom dropped this doll here," and looked at the room ahead. My view was of the room partially lit by the light from my friend's room, where all the dolls had their faces turned toward the door. I didn't give it much importance in my child mind. My friend said, "Sometimes they fall," and told me to go to the kitchen while he put it away. After eating until we were stuffed and returning to the room, we switched to playing Bomberman, the one where you could ride animals. After a while, we heard a thud from the room door. When I looked, another doll had fallen there. We could hear his mom in the shower, singing, so it couldn't have been her. At that moment, I remember getting goosebumps and telling my friend, "It's not possible for a doll to fall and roll this far to the room door." He looked apprehensive, and we went to ask his mom in the bathroom if she had forgotten a doll in the hallway or dropped it, and she said no. We stayed in the kitchen until she got out of the shower, and nothing else happened until midnight. Due to the coldness of the place, it felt like my body couldn't produce enough heat even with the blanket and clothes I was wearing, and I felt something wrong with my blanket, small movements. Near my foot, it felt like tiny steps moving from one side to the other on the mattress, and something other than the pillow was touching my head. My eyes tear up just writing this, but I was so desperate that the only thing I could do was scream my friend's name. He woke up startled, asking what was wrong while heading for the light switch, and I managed to say there was something in the room. When the light was on, there was indeed a doll at my foot and another next to my head. He came over, took the dolls, and pinned them against the wall, breaking them. His mom heard the commotion and came running towards us. I remember crying and saying they couldn't play such a trick on me, and they said they didn't do anything. Then came the classic, "I want to go home," that every little kid says. His mum said she would take me if I wanted, but first wanted me to see the doll room to show there was nothing there, that it was just in our heads and a coincidence. Deep down, she knew we wouldn't do something like that, but wanted to show she was in control. Since she was the only adult around, we followed her as she said, "See, there's nothing," until she demanded the expression of the dolls, which were kind of frowning, with their painted eyes following our movements, with very subtle movements noticed by everyone. We were standing with our backs to the room door in brief silence when we heard another thud from the hallway. When we looked at the door, there was another damn doll sitting there. I looked at my friend, he looked at me, and we ran towards the living room door, desperate. His mom stood still and said, "Something is wrong here, stay by the door." And that's what they said until she came out of the room and said, "I'll take you home and ask your mom if we can sleep there," pale as wax and visibly scared too. She was a mulatto. I never went back there. Apart from the fire I would report next, the rest of the story was told in a neighborhood bar. From time to time, my friend would comment on something that happened there until a fire started in that doll room for no apparent reason. According to him, they managed to control it, but the room itself was all blackened, and he had to sleep at his siblings' houses for a long time. They brought the priest from the parish on the street above, but he said there was nothing he could do because what was there was very old, and that he would inform the church representatives for an exorcism. His mom, not knowing what else to do, sought help at a spiritist center near a shopping mall in the city, and 2 people went there at night. She mentioned that when they opened the gate, it slammed shut forcefully, and the mediums looked at each other, swallowing hard, and headed for the front door. That door wouldn't open, even though it was unlocked, and they had to damage the bottom part to get into the house. She doesn't know what happened inside, but said the lights in the house flickered, turning on and off frantically. After a few minutes, they came out with a crystal in hand and said that whatever was there wouldn't bother them anymore. After that, they said they would no longer feel cold or anything strange in the house.